What's up everyone, Taiki here, and today I want to give an update to the Maker trade. If you like the content, please like and subscribe and check out the premium Discord. I post 3 videos every single week. So what you're seeing here is just one of my wallets. This isn't my entire position, but I talked about last week how I have full ported my portfolio into MKR, and I posted this yesterday, but right now, I'm like roughly 1.3 to 1.4x leverage long with an average price of 13.26. So it's been pretty nice, right? Because the rest of the markets have just been getting absolutely destroyed. But I'm just chilling, I'm just chilling, I'm making money, cool, right? And when I talk about like leverage, a lot of people like try to use like hyperliquid or like perps, right? But I kind of like just using Aave, right? Maybe that's just like this DeFi boomer side of me, but I'm just showing this because what I've effectively done is last week I took like $600,000 of Maker. I borrowed 300K of USDC. I bought 300K of Maker. I recollateralized it. And then, this position is up like 200K. And then if you add my other positions, in total, I think I'm up like roughly $500,000 so far. So far the trade is good. But of course, like the problem or the question is, when do I sell? Of course, being up on a position is not really a good reason to sell, right? It's like, well, why did you buy something to begin with? Like, what is the thesis? Has the thesis materialized? And how high do I expect this asset to go, right? So I'll be answering all those questions in this video. So to rehash the Maker thesis, and by the way, Maker rebranded to Sky. They're the same tokens, right? So I'll be using them interchangeably. Hopefully, don't get too confused. Obviously, if you're a crypto native, you don't like the rebrand. Like no one, like I don't know a single person that likes the rebrand, right? So the sentiment for this thing is down only. But if you actually study the fundamentals, it's actually getting better, right? So there's kind of this divergence between sentiment and fundamentals. And that's usually where a lot of opportunities are made. When everyone, right, if the majority of market participants think that this asset is cursed, but then the asset is like actually like really good, then, there's a lot of future buyers for this particular asset. And in terms of future buyers, of course, I think the buybacks are pretty significant. They're buying back, Maker makes so much money, right? They make like roughly $90 million in profits a year. All those goes into buybacks. That is, being accelerated recently. Feel free to watch my last week's video for more color. But they're buying like roughly $10,000 of their tokens every 15 minutes, which is like roughly $900K to $1 million every single day. And I've gotten a lot of questions on like, well, like, why would you buy like Maker, right? Like, why don't you buy like Hyperliquid, right? It's like, because he's an idiot. I mean, this is not untrue, right? But you have to put things into perspective, right? Not all buybacks are created equal. If you're going, I'll link this into the description below, right? But when I wrote this, Maker was like at roughly 1,600. When I made the video, it was like 1,500, right? But $30 million of buy pressure for a $1.6 billion asset would mean that the protocol is going to buy back almost 2% of its entire supply in a single month, essentially, right? Like Michael Saylor, like everyone in crypto makes a huge deal out of Saylor, right? It's like, oh my God, Saylor issued shares, he's going to buy back or buy Bitcoin, right? And it's like a big deal. But like over the past 4.5 years, like they've only bought 2% of the entire supply, right? So think about all the buying Saylor has done for Bitcoin and then compress that into a single month for Maker, and then ask yourself, what is price going to do, right? And that was basically the bet that I was making. It's like, hey, like just buy Maker, like it's you're gonna make money, it's pretty simple, right? It's math, right? Like I'm Asian, I can do the math, right? That's like one thing I'm good at. So I think that's like pretty significant. And of course, Hyperliquid is good too, right? But since November, they've purchased 1.5% of the supply over like the past like 3 or 4 months, which is, I mean, yeah, compare that to Saylor, like that's pretty strong, right? But also, I think Hyperliquid, like I'm not bearish Hyperliquid, right? But I think the reason I would buy Maker over Hyperliquid is pretty obvious. Like everyone understands Hyperliquid, right? The bull story there, the bull case there. So there's like no alpha buying Hyperliquid, right? Even like, I'm not saying it's a bad buy, but there's like no alpha buying Hyperliquid, or like there's like no edge because everyone understands it, right? So you're like just like going with like whatever everyone knows. Whereas if I'm like buying Maker, like early to the trend, then, I have people calling me an idiot. That's good, right? I want people to think I'm an idiot. That's generally how good trades are formed. So obviously like the buybacks are significant, and actually, before I talk about like the Spark token launch, I just like want to talk about the differences of the buybacks, right? Because if you look back to my July 2023 video, I was like, hey, you know, Maker is an under-owned asset that could have a hated rally. And I'm saying the same thing right now. Maker is an under-owned asset that can have a hated rally. You know, at this, like with this video, like I was looking at this video, like Bitcoin, like when I made this video, like 5 days ago, right? Maker was at 1400, Bitcoin was at 95, ETH 2600, Solana 170. I'm not sure if you can see this because like it's pretty small, but like, you know, the markets have gotten destroyed and Maker is just chugging along, right? Like I think if the market bounces, Maker will be the strongest performer. If the markets are sideways, Maker will be the best performer or one of the best performers. And if the market goes down, then Maker will probably like stay flat or something, right? So, you know, I asked myself like, what's the downside on the trade? Not much. What's the upside? Well, I'll address that later. And you know, like that, I mean, I think that's pretty simple, right? Like you just want to bet as big as possible early to the trend because that's when the risk is least, right? That's when the risk is lowest. And one precedence we have is like like I said, the 2023 run, right? Where Maker went from $500 to like $4,000, basically in a straight line. You know, it took a long time, but it was basically a straight line. And I made it, you know, I made this comment last week too, but I'm like, hey, like if you just bought like the green candle from like the buyback proposal, it felt bad, right? Like buying that green candle, but you still made a bunch of money, right? And that was like the same argument I was making. Just like it's okay, like, you know, like this thing is pumping for a reason, right? Like it's pumping because it's gonna pump more, right? That's the reason it's up. So it's okay to buy, right? Because the reason to buy is because it's gonna go higher. And you know, obviously it chugged along, but the buybacks, it's slightly different this time around. So if you So this is there you go. So this is the proposal from June 2023, right? When I was making this video, right? I was like, okay, like this is a bullish catalyst. Let's just buy for easy money, right? And how the buybacks happened back then was, let's say they had let's say they had $1 million in profits, right? That they were going to use the buyback. What they would do is they would buy $500,000 of Maker, and then they would pair it with $500,000 worth of DAI. And then they would, you know, create protocol-owned liquidity, right? So $1 million of profits only resulted in $500,000 of buybacks, okay? Which is fine, right? You know, it's still better than nothing. But this time around, 100% of, so there is no protocol-owned liquidity, right? I mean, there is, but they're not building that up. They're just buying, right? So the buy pressure is twice that now than like last time around, right? So that alone should be very supportive of the price, right? And that I mean, like that's why, you know, like the pace of the buybacks is like insane, right? Like it's crazy. You know, it's all relative, right? It's like not all buybacks are made equal. You know, it's all like relative to like whatever the market cap and like the liquidity profile is. And the argument that I was making is like you can't what if some Saudi nation announced that over the next 2 months they're going to buy 2% of Bitcoin supply, right? Like what is Bitcoin going to do? It's probably going to like 2x or something, right? Because they're going to front run the buys and then they're going to dump on the Saudis or something, right? Or like whatever, right? It's like the same thing. Like you can't price in that much buy pressure. It just like doesn't. I just think it's like very, very difficult. And of course, on any given day, like it can dump, right? You know, they're buying back $1 million a day. If I just dumped this entire position, then like it, assuming all things equal, it's going to be flat. But the thing is, I mean, they're buying back at right now. You know, they have like $54 million of like buy pressure left, right? And then you know, not only that, there's like profits that's going to go into more buybacks. So I expect these buybacks to keep continuing. And as long as we are in this pretty choppy market, I think people are going to find reasons to buy Maker. You know, what happened last time around, right? Is you know, when I made my Maker bull case, people were like, oh yeah, I mean, people are going to sell into it, right? But what ends up happening with crypto is that like people in crypto, they don't really read governance posts, right? They kind of just scroll Twitter and then they like just buy whatever is like, you know, like being shilled, right? And with Maker, it's one of those things where as soon as it like starts outperforming, people are gonna like find reasons to buy, you know, because like, oh, like DeFi narrative, right? Stablecoin narrative, oh, buybacks, right? So, you know, a lot of momentum traders they end up like buying Maker like here and here, which from a trade perspective is not bad. But it's one of those things where there's always like people to sell into in the future, because whenever crypto assets outperform, like it just creates more buyers. It's very, very reflexive in that way. So there's that. And then, you know, like I mentioned, I think 2K, right? Maker is like it'll get there pretty fast, right? I mean, this is, but also Maker is like a boomer asset, right? It's like the old DeFi protocol. It's not going to like go parabolic anytime soon, right? I mean, I hope it does. I don't think it will. So it's one of those things where you have to be really patient. And you know, one thing, I was like looking, I think everyone should do this too, but you should like just study every single trade that you have taken over like the past 2 years, right? Just take a look, right? It might not feel good, right? But just take a look and then try to like jot down like key lessons, key mistakes, and like figure out like what you're good at, what you're bad at. And historically, and I mean, you all know this, right? If you've been watching me, but typically like my asset selection is like pretty good, right? It's like what I buy, like, you know, like Maker buying here was good, but then I would sell at like 2K or something, right? And then, I mean, that's still a good trade, right? But I wish I sized more. I put 33% of my portfolio here, and then I sold, I basically sold like most of it here, right? Which is still a good trade, but in hindsight, I should have just bet way more here, you know? Like, this is like the point of like max opportunity, because no one's paying attention. It's like me and like a few dozen people paying attention, and like we don't have infinite money, right? So like that's when we need to be betting the hardest. Right, like bet big as much as you can early into trends, assuming that you have an edge, right? Like just don't, you can't just buy something because, oh, like we're balancing, right? No, like you have to be like, okay, like this thing is gonna pump for these reasons. This is why I think I'm early. Therefore, I need to bet big. So that's why I'm like, okay, I bet 33% here, but this time around, I'm gonna bet the farm, okay? So that's kind of what I've done. And that's why I've also added some leverage, because I just like don't think this is, the risk reward is like pretty favorable, and right. And also going back to like what I was talking about, like, studying my past trades. When it comes to like DeFi trades, I tend to like get good entries, and like my buy size is okay, right? But I sell way too early. I'm way too impatient when it comes to DeFi coins, but I'm way too greedy when it comes to like the more speculative stuff, right? For example, right, I sold Maker at 2x and I undersized, even though I missed like the last parabola. Aave, right, I bought here, I sold here, and I like missed out on the last 2x. And then when it comes to like Fartcoin and AI16Z, my entries were like really good, but I just was too greedy, right? Which kind of makes sense from like a human psychological / greed perspective. It's like if you're holding like Maker, right, it's like it moves very, very slow. So, it moves so slow that in this period of like this like slow grind higher, there's like so many things going on that, you know, people like, because like back then, maybe I was like less self-aware or something, but people would call me a midcurve, and I'm like, oh no, I'm not a midcurve, right? And then I would like buy hold Maker, and then people are buying meme coins and they're making more money than me, and I'm like, oh fuck, I feel FOMO, and then I sell Maker to like buy something else, right? Even though like I probably sold right before the pump, you know. Same goes like Aave, right? But when it comes to like Fartcoin, right, it's like, okay, like my entries were good. I had asset selection was like great, right? Like, you know, like technically people gave me shit for it, but like Fartcoin was something that was like the best asset to buy post election, right? You know, but then like my execution was like, okay, maybe I was too greedy, because then, you know, it's like, oh, like it can keep going higher, right? It's gonna go fast, right? So all that to say is, when it comes to DeFi trades, I tend to, in the past, I would undersize, and then I would be too impatient. So this time around, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna size appropriately, and I'm gonna be patient as fuck, right? I'm gonna be patient. I'm gonna let Maker cook, right? I'm gonna let this thing cook, right? I'll let the buybacks work in my favor. I'll let people, you know, discover my thesis. I think the market will converge to my thesis, and I think that's kind of what I'll try to do this time around. So speaking about like, you know, letting Maker cook, of course, I think buybacks alone is not like a good enough bull case. And I mentioned in my last week's video that The real bull case is Spark farming. So Spark is this $3 billion money market. I'm not going to make predictions on like how much this thing is going to be worth, but Maker, right, as part of their rebrand, there's going to be all these like spin-offs, right, from Maker. So for example, Spark came out of Maker, they're going to have their own token, and the only way to acquire them is to stake USDS or Sky, right? So hypothetically, right, I'm not, just to use round numbers, let's say Spark is worth like $1 billion FTV, $100 million circulating market, like whatever, right? Low float, high FTV, like whatever. Then the only way to farm that is going to be by staking USDS or Maker, And if you read the economics here, let's go here. Right, 70% is going to go to USDS holders and 30% to like Maker/Sky. And if you study this one, they mentioned that half of the emissions are going to happen in the first 2 years, right? So assuming that it's like $1 billion FDV, just for the sake of simplicity, that's going to be $500 million worth of value going to Sky stakers and USDS stakers. So, I mean, like let's say $500 million, 70% of that goes to USDS, right? And if people want like a 10% yield over like the 2 year period, then technically that can create $3.5 billion of incremental demand for USDS, right? Which would make this thing hit new highs, right? And think about it, like if the USDS supply hits new highs and there's buybacks and like the regulatory regime is getting better, then technically like there's nothing really stopping it from getting past this high, Of course, like the highs from 2021, it was like, okay, like we had a bubble, right? With DeFi, and then like we had like a crazy bubble, right? So like maybe it's unfair to compare it to this peak, but surely we can get above this peak, right? Because I mean, March 2024, the stablecoin supply was like 4.5. Now it's 7.5. And if Spark farming launches, I think it'll get past like 10, or it'll approach 10. So if that's happening, then like why can't we just grind higher? Maybe like something like this or something, whatever, right? Something like this. Like why not? Like I just don't see why that can't happen. And yeah, and I think the reason Maker started pumping recently is because when did I made this video on the 22nd, right? So I didn't know this back then, but on the 25th, Rune posted this article or like this post on the forums. And it's kind of like boring, but at the very end, he talks about how, next week they're going to publish like the drafts of all the practical work that has been done to launch the Spark artifact. And then, we'll gather some insights or whatever. So it seems like this thing should happen relatively soon, this Spark farming. And if this happens, right, it pumps metrics, it pumps profitability, right? Because let's say this creates like $2 billion of additional USDS demand, right? Then what the Maker team can do is they can take the $2 billion and they can put it into Athena or T-bills earning 5%, and then bam, that's like $100 million over like the next year or so, right? And then that goes directly into buyback. So there's actual catalysts on the horizon that could pump the metrics even harder, even though in the short term, I still think it's going to go higher, right? But if this happens, I think it's going to add fuel to the buyback fire. And there are also like other sub-DAOs/stars in the future. I think they're going to do one on Solana, like a real world asset one, right? And there was also like this thing that got announced yesterday, some Barachain thing, right? This is going to have a token, and the only way to farm it is by staking USDS, right? So, any new star or any new sub-DAO that comes out of Maker is a positive in my view, because it just means that these are all going to poop out new tokens, and the only way to farm it is by holding USDS or the Sky token, which creates more utility for the governance token and also pumps metrics, which is good for buybacks. So there's a lot of good things going for it. Also, the stablecoin, I'm not sure if this matters, honestly, right? I think the US stablecoin bill is more targeting Circle, Tether, and like the very centralized stablecoin issuers. But like knowing the crypto markets and traders, if this thing, let's say the government announces, okay, like this is going to be passed for like July or something, right? I would expect people to like start like buying things like Maker, because it's like, oh, it's a stablecoin project, right? Ooh, yeah, so it's going to probably be a part of like the stablecoin basket, which would also create incremental flows into the token. So there's a lot of tailwinds for Maker, I think, especially because, with the whole, the destruction of like meme coins, maybe people want like the fundamental coins, like that's, maybe like if you're like a new subscriber to my channel, you're probably like thinking like, what the fuck is this guy doing, right? It's like, I subscribed to this guy to bull post Farcoin and AI16C, and now he's doing fundamental analysis. But I've made the majority of my wealth, and like I grew the majority of my audience by like through DeFi stuff, right? So like this is like what I'm actually good at. I kind of strayed away from it because I was like, okay, like post Trump election, you just have to buy like the most speculative stuff. But like honestly, like for me, I just tried to like, or keyword try. I try to make money in any market environment, and I try to understand like which regime we're on. And if we were in like a post-Trump speculative regime, you buy like the speculative stuff. But once that bubble has burst, it's time to like buy the more fundamental stuff. And I think Maker is a really good candidate. I'm sure other DeFi tokens will do well as well. But for me, instead of like buying like 5 different DeFi tokens, and feeling good about myself, giving myself this false sense of safety from this illusion of like diversification, I might as well put all my money into my best idea, which is Maker. Because if you think about it, there is no, like broadly speaking, there is like no diversification in crypto, right? If Bitcoin dumps, everything else dumps. There could be some idiosyncratic strength, such as like Maker, right? Where the rest of the markets implode and then like Maker goes up only. But that's pretty rare usually, right? But I guess like that's kind of my job, right? My job is to identify these money-making opportunities, and I mentioned, like back in 2023, I said, Maker eats to 1, and like this time around, like I don't see like why it can't get above 1. And interestingly, I was looking, so this is back in 2023. This is me, right? I posted this in August 2023, and I was like, okay, like. I was like, okay, let's figure out a way to, make the buybacks more efficient. So basically what I said, okay, you're creating protocol and liquidity, but after a certain liquidity threshold, like you don't need to build more liquidity, right? It's kind of like a waste of money. So I'm like, okay, like after the protocol and liquidity reaches 20 million, just buy back Maker, right? Just no more protocol and liquidity. And then I think Rune posted that like, okay, like yeah, maybe in the future. That's his way of saying like, fuck you, like I'm not gonna listen to you. But actually, right, this time around, I mean, they say, okay, $15 million of worth of liquidity, and after that, we're gonna like just burn it. So technically, a year and a half later, they listen to me. Maybe governance works, guys. Maybe governance works. Just kidding. This is probably more of a coincidence than not. But okay, cool. I think I've addressed everything I wanted to cover. My take on Maker. I think it does outperforms most other coins. I feel very strongly about Maker. Other coins I don't have a strong opinion on, so I might as well like just bet the farm on Maker. Pretty simple, right? Buyback's good. Fundamentals, okay. Narratives wise, it makes sense. There's tailwinds for it, and there's good reasons for the market to bid this thing over time. So thank you guys for watching. If you liked more content and you want to get my buys and my portfolio changes in real time, check out the premium Discord. I post 3 videos every single week. I share my portfolio in real time, and yeah, thank you guys for watching. Bye bye.